The 11th Tuesday, we talk about our culture. Hit him harder. I slapped Maury on the back. Harder. I slapped him again. Near his shoulders. Now down lower. Maury, dressed in pajama bottoms, lay in bed on his side, his head flush against the pillow and his mouth open. The physical therapist was showing me how to bang loose the poison that was in his lungs, which he needed done regularly now, to keep it from solidifying, to keep him breathing. I always knew you wanted to hit me, Maury grasped. Yeah, I joked as I wrapped my fist against the alabaster skin of his back. This is for you, B. You gave me sophomore year. Whack. Oh, wait. This is for that B you gave me sophomore year. Whack. We all laughed, a nervous laugh that comes when the devil is in with earshot. I would have been cute. It would have been cute, this little scene, were it not what we all knew it was, the final moments before death. Maury's disease was now dangerously close to his surrender spot, his lungs. He had been predicting he would die from choking, and I would not imagine a more terrible way to go. Sometimes he would close his eyes and try to draw the air up into his mouth and nostrils, and it seemed as if he were trying to lift an anchor. Outside it was jacket weather, early October. The leaves clumped in the piles around the lawn in West Newton. Maury's physical therapist had come earlier in the day, and I usually excused myself when the nurses or specialists had business with him. But as the weeks passed and our time ran down, I was increasingly less self-conscious about the physical embarrassment. I wanted to be there. I wanted to observe everything. This was not like me, but then neither were a lot of things that were happening the last few months in Maury's house. So I watched the therapist work on Maury in the bed, pounding the back of his ribs, asking if he could feel the congestion loosening within him. And when she took a break, she asked if I wanted to try. I said yes. Maury, his face down on the pillow, gave a little smile. Not too hard, he said. I'm an old man. I drummed on his back and sides, moving around as she instructed. I hated the idea of Maury laying in the bed under any circumstances. Like his last aphorism, when you're in bed, you're dead, rang in my ears, and curled on his side. He was so small, so withered. It was more than a boy's body than a man's. I saw the paleness of his skin, the stray white hairs, the way his arms hung limp and helpless. I thought about how much time he was spending in trying to shape our bodies, lifting weights, crunching sit-ups, and in the end, nature takes it away from us anyhow. Beneath my fingers, I felt the loose flesh around Maury's bones, and I thudded against him hard as instructed. The truth is, I was pounding on his back when I wanted to be hitting the walls. Mitch, Maury grabbed, his voice jumpy as a jackhammer as I pounded him. Uh-huh. When did I give you a B? Maury believed in inherent good of people, but he also saw what they could become. People are only mean when they're threatened, he said later that day, and that's what our culture does. That's what our economy does. Even people who have jobs in our economy are threatened because they worry about losing them. And when you get threatened, you start to look out only for yourself. You start making money a god. It's all part of this culture, he exhaled, which is why I don't buy into it. I nodded at him and squeezed his hands. We held hands regularly now. That was another change for me. Things that before would have made me embarrassed or squeamish now routinely handled. The catheter bag connected to the tube inside of him, filled with greenish waste fluid, lay by my foot near the leg of his chair. A few months earlier, it might have disgusted me. It was inconsequential now. So was the smell of his room after Maury had to use the commode. He did not have the luxury of moving from place to place, of closing a bathroom door behind him, spraying some air freshener when he left. There was his bed, and there was his chair, and that was his life. If my life had been squeezed into such a thimble, I doubt I could have made it smell any better. Here's what I mean by building. Well, my own subculture, Maury said. I don't mean you disregard every rule of your community. I don't go around half naked, for example. I don't run through red lights. The little things I can obey, but the big things, how we think, what we value, those you must choose yourself. You can't let anyone or your society determine those for you. Take my condition, the things I'm not supposed to be embarrassed about now, not being able to walk, or that I am supposed to be embarrassed about now, not being able to walk, not being able to wipe my butt, waking up some mornings wanting to cry. That is nothing innately embarrassing or shaming about them. It's the same for women not being thin enough or men not being rich enough. It's just what our culture would have you believe, but don't believe it. I asked Maury why he hadn't moved somewhere else when he was younger. Where? I don't know. South America? New Guinea? Someplace not as selfish as America? Every society has its own problems, Maury assured, lifting his eyebrows, the closest he would come to a shrug. The way to do it, I think, isn't to run away. You have to work at creating your own culture. Look, no matter where you live, the biggest deficit we human beings have is our short sightedness. We don't see what we could be. We should be seeing at our potential, stretching ourselves into everything we can become. But if you're surrounded by people who say, I want mine now, you end up with a few people with everything and a military to keep the poor ones from rising up and stealing it. Maury looked over my shoulder to the far window. Sometimes you could hear a passing truck or a whip of the wind. He gazed for a moment at his neighbor's house and then continued. The problem, Mitch, is that we don't believe we are as much alike as we are, whites and blacks, Catholics and Protestants, men and women. If we saw each other as we were more alike, we might be very eager to join in one big human family in this world and to care about that family the way we care about our own. But believe me, when you're dying, you see it as true. We all have the same beginning, birth, and we all have the same end, death. So now, how different could we be? Invest in the human family, invest in the people, build a little community of those you love and who love you. He squeezed my hand gently. I squeezed back harder. And like that carnival contest where you bang a hammer and watch the disc rise up to the pole, I could almost see my body heat rise up Maury's chest and neck into his cheeks and his eyes, and he smiled. In the beginning of life, when we are all infants, we need others to survive, right? And at the end of life, you get like me. You need others to survive again, right? His voice dropped to a whisper. But here's the secret. In between, we need others as well. Later that afternoon, Connie and I went into the bedroom to watch the O.J. Simpson verdict. It was a tense scene as the principals all turned to face the jury. Simpson in his blue shirt, surrounded by his small army of lawyers, the prosecutor who wanted him behind bars just a few feet away. When the foreman read the verdict, not guilty, Connie shrieked. Oh my God! We watched as Simpson hugged his lawyers. We listened as the commentators tried to explain what all it meant. We saw crowds of blacks celebrating in the street outside the courthouse and crowds of whites sitting stunned inside restaurants. The decision was being held as momentous. Momentous. Even though murders take place every day, Connie went out in the hall and she had seen enough. I heard the door to Maury's study close. I stared at the TV set. Everyone in the world is watching this thing, I told myself. Then, from the other room, I heard the ruffling of Maury being lifted from his chair, and I smiled. As the trial of the century reached its dramatic conclusion, my old professor was sitting on the toilet. This is a flashback. It is 1979, a basketball game in the Brandeis gym. The team is doing well, and the student section begins to chant, "We're number one! We're number one!" Maury is sitting nearby. He's puzzled by the cheer. At one point, in the midst of "We're number one," he rises and yells, "But what's wrong with number two?" The students look at him. They stop chanting. He sits down and smiles triumphantly.